Let's get to the business of the day, which is to welcome our wonderful guest, Ellyn. I've been hearing about you forever. Lots of good things from the Virginia Beach people, especially Dave Bennett. So it's a great pleasure to actually have you joining us today. And as you know from the flyer, Ellyn had a near-death experience that she's going to tell us about, but she's also an author, a fiction writer, and she has many, many strings to her bow, which we're going to be hearing about this afternoon. So again, without further delay, it is my great pleasure to introduce you today, Ellyn. So take it away.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I feel like, at least virtually, I'm in my old stomping grounds because I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. And I went to the Maryland suburbs. So I lived in just over the D.C. line in downtown Silver Spring until the end of 2014 when I moved down here to beautiful Virginia Beach. So it's funny because in these, I talk about my NDE. I also do a newsletter, and I, for many years, gave presentations about the great shift of the ages that we're going through, from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. And so I send out a newsletter periodically. It's free on my website, which is LionMagic.com. And the energies are having a lot of people relocate. I mean, there's lots of change. And if you're like me, I'm a Taurus and I hate change. But you know how when we tell the universe that we hate something, the universe will say, well, oh yeah, watch this, So it's, I have learned to try not to tempt fate. So since I have such a wonderful amount of time, usually I'm trying to squeeze in an experience that felt like it took 2,000 years into half an hour or an hour. And since I have longer than that today, let me just start with a couple of early things to give you some background about me. So, born in Washington, D.C., and I was adopted as an infant. And it wasn't until 1996 that I found out anything about my biological family. So I was raised in DC, and when I was 12 years old, my adoptive mother died of cancer. She was in the hospital, and my grandmother was sitting in the living room and taking care of my brother and me while my father was at the hospital. And I had gone to bed and I was asleep, and I woke up. And my mother was standing at the bottom of my bed, just as fully manifested as any of us are right now. And, I was a little confused by how she was there, but, she said that she loved me and that everything was going to be fine. And then she kind of faded off. And I thought, uh-oh. So I got up and I walked into the living room and I told my grandmother that my mother had died. And this was her mother. And so she burst into tears and said, oh no, honey, that hasn't happened yet. And the phone rang, and it was my father calling from the hospital. So I started having these kinds of experiences very early in life. In fact, one of my earliest memories, I don't remember much, but one of my earliest memories was that I was sitting in bed, 5 or 6, maybe 7 years old, sobbing and sobbing and sobbing and saying, how could you have left me here alone with these people? And to this day, I don't know whether I was talking to God or talking to my higher self or talking to the ETs on the mothership or what. I have no idea, but I was unhappy because I knew I was different and I did not fit in here and they did not like it. So I started, because of my experience with my mother, when I was in high school, I really started, and this was like the mid 50s. Okay. So I really started reading everything that I could about metaphysics, because I instantly knew that there was a lot more going on than they were teaching me in Sunday school. So I studied all this stuff. And I started with the Seth material, if anybody's interested, or anybody knows that, and and went from there. And we had, in DC, we had a fabulous bookstore called Yes Bookstore in Georgetown. And I would go there like once a week and come out with like a stack of 15 books. And so by my early 30s, I figured I knew it all. And because I had been kind of raised to be a people pleaser and to fit in no matter what it took, I really was I had very low self-esteem and lack of worthiness. And so, but I had this information, and I kind of thought I knew it all, and I think I kind of used that as a club to beat people up and to make myself feel more, feel superior, because I didn't have that from the inside. And this is an important notion that will come back later in the talk. But so by 1985, I was 35 years old, and my life wasn't, it was going okay, but nothing to write home about, really. And I think I was pretty unhappy. And it was Columbus Day weekend, and I had, done a weekend movie binge and was taking my videos back to Blockbusters, if anybody remembers that. And I had left those off, and I was going down the street to go to the grocery store. And I came into this intersection that had it had a cross street, but it wasn't at a 90-degree angle. It was at a kind of a funny angle like that. So there were only two cars on the road. This other car was coming straight. I was going straight. We get to the intersection, and all of a sudden I see this car coming into my lane. And I had enough time to think, oh my God, he's, and that was it. That was it. And the next thing I knew, I was looking down at the top of my car from about 12 to 15 feet up. And it was kind of disorienting and took me a minute to figure out what was going on. I will note, I felt no impact whatsoever, none. I was just like jettisoned out of my body. And so I looked around, and it was odd because I could see in every, like 360 degrees. And I could see everything that was going on. And I saw the guy who had hit me get out of his car and walk over. And I thought, isn't that sweet? He's coming to see if I'm okay. And he reached into my car and turned my headlights off. I didn't realize until later that was because Maryland was a contributory negligence state, and he was trying to blame me for the car accident.
Whoa.
So, well, but I lost interest. And I thought, because I had read all this stuff, I think there were like 2 books out by Raymond Moody and Ken Ring about that mentioned near-death experiences, and I had read them. And I said, gee, I think there ought to be a tunnel of light around here somewhere. I mean, let me just tell you, I was thrilled to be out of my body. This was not a traumatic experience for me. I was like, woohoo, look at this. And so as soon as I thought that, there's this whoosh. And this tunnel of light appears. And I heard it first, and then I felt it. And it was this energy that was so sweet and so exquisite that I just wanted to jump into it and stay there. And as I'm moving toward it, it's kind of pulling me in. So it also had, in addition to this just incredible sweetness, it pulled me in like a magnet. So I really didn't have to do anything. And I don't even know if I could have fought it if I had wanted to, which I didn't. So I moved through this tunnel, and the energy was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And I was like, oh my God, this is where, this is what it's supposed to feel like. You know, life, whatever. This feeling is what it's supposed to feel like. And I've been out of this my whole life. And I don't even know how I existed outside of this. So I came out at the end of the tunnel into this, it wasn't even like a place, it was kind of like an atmosphere. And it was bright light, but this concentrated energy of what I figured out was love and peace and joy and bliss and fulfillment and contentment. And it was just like, okay, I'm done. I'm staying. This is great. I was supposed to be here all along. I don't know how I ended up out of here, wherever here is, but I'm staying because this is sublime. And I was an English major, an English teacher, and I'm a writer, and I was an editor for 40 years. And there still are really no adequate words for this. And except that I felt as if, and I see this at the beach all the time, the waves come up on the sand and they'll drop some drops here and there on the sand and the waves retreat. And these little drops of water are there by themselves. And these drops of water have been left by themselves. And they really feel like they're out of their element because they're on sand. They're not in the ocean. And I felt like that's the way I had been. And now it was like the ocean had come and grabbed me off the sand and brought me back into the ocean. And simultaneously, I felt like I was part of that ocean, but also I was still myself. And that seemed perfectly logical, perfectly normal. And so I just wallowed in that for a little bit. And what I realized was I had yearned to be back there my whole life. And what I was feeling was that energy had been yearning for me the whole time too. The whole time that I was away. I had been missed as much as I missed being there. So I started to hear sort of a commotion, and I looked over, and there were like 200 people, and they're all like waving. And So I saw all these people, and the first person I saw was my mother. And I usually start to cry. Even after more than 35 years, I still almost start to cry when I think of that part. But my mother and my grandmother and a couple of aunts and uncles and my paternal grandparents that I hadn't known either of my grandfathers in life, but they were there. And my maternal grandmother I'd known till I was about 6. They were all there. And they were all like, oh my God, it's so wonderful to see you. And we hope you've been able to tell that we have been watching over you your whole life and trying to help you where we could. And whenever you were in despair, we put our arms around you and we hoped that you could feel the love and the comfort that we were trying to give you. And they said, we're just so proud of you. And I'm like, why would you be proud of me? I haven't done anything. At that point, I was an executive secretary, and I always felt I was supposed to do something else, especially to do with writing, but I hadn't managed to get there yet. And, I said, I haven't accomplished anything. I haven't gotten married. I haven't had kids. I haven't conformed in probably any way, even though I have tried. I've turned myself into a pretzel trying, but it just never works. And they said, we're proud of you for sticking it out because being on planet Earth is not easy. And only the bravest souls were allowed to go. And you have done so well. Just getting up every morning and putting one foot in front of the other is humongous. And we're just so proud of you. So I basked in that for quite some time. One of the fascinating parts, there were so many fascinating parts, but one of the really fascinating parts was that there were these people that I recognized immediately, but I had never seen them in life. And that was my biological father and my biological grandparents on his side. And grandfather on my mother's side. And I knew them instantly. I knew exactly who they were. They were there to greet me too. And we were all chit-chatting, and they knew my adoptive parent, my adoptive family. And I realized it's like, it was all supposed to happen. It was planned because they all know each other. And the whole adoption thing was supposed to happen. Isn't that strange? But of course I thought, well, it could have been a lot easier, but I guess not. So anyway, so after a while I thought, well, I think I'm supposed to see somebody else. And at the moment, I'm getting a little disconcerted by all this light. And having been, used to 3D and colors and depth in the landscape, it was a little disconcerting that everything was just sort of white. Now, granted, it was alive, but it was all white. So as I thought that, I wish it looked more like a place that I could relate to. And it was as if this hand that had the fingers dipped in paints came up and went like that. And suddenly there's this park scene. And it was beautiful. And with grass and flowers and trees and birds and butterflies and all of the animals, the cats and dogs, every cat and dog I had ever had that had passed, all came by and greeted me and then ran off again because they were just having so much fun. And there was this pathway, and I walked down the path toward the woods, these beautiful trees that were totally alive. And they kind of talked to me as I went and welcomed me. And the flowers had all these colors that I've never seen on planet Earth before, that were so vibrant, and everything was so alive. And I could have stopped along the way a zillion times and just like talked to the grass and stuff. But I did keep going. And I walked through some trees, and there was a little, like a stone bridge over a rippling brook, and I went over that. And then I walked into this clearing, and kind of across the clearing, there was this kind of a gazebo type building. And I could see that there were beings in there. And so I kept walking, and I walked in, and there were 12 beings of light in a circle, and I kind of ended up in the middle of the circle. And I'm 5'5", and they were like 12 to 15 feet tall. So I'm like, hello. And they could have been very, very intimidating, but they weren't, because they were just, I could just feel the love rolling off them. And the second thing I noticed was humor. And they were just very, very lighthearted and jovial, and almost everything they said into my head was carried on laughter. And again, I knew them. I knew them so well. I felt like I had known them for eons. And these were beings who had helped me plan my life, and many, 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 many other lives. So we talked for a long time, and I had a lot of questions, like, pardon my French, what the hell was that about? It's like, it's horrible there. And it's like, was that the punishment planet or what? And so they showed me, and they said, this wasn't your first time. And they showed me all of my past lives. Now, I did not. A lot of people have, the well-known life review. And I did not have a life review per se. I was shown all of my past lives, all of my past lives, kind of like a movie, like a silent movie that I watched. These big screens just suddenly appeared in the gazebo, and I could see all of them, and I could see the progression of lives, and I could see the progression of things I'd learned. And and then I said, yeah, but I get it that I've had all these lives, and that this is what they were, and these are the things I learned. But what's the point? I mean, why would any of us decide to go there rather than just stay here where we're loved and it's wonderful, and all we have to do is think about something and it happens, and what the heck? And one of the reasons was, it's like you got bored. It's like, I don't think so. But so then they showed me the whole history of humanity and what was going on and where we were headed and why we did this. And oddly enough, to begin with, we all thought it would be really fun. I don't know. I said, yeah, but the novelty wears off. And so they showed me all of this stuff, and they said, but you know, you're there. You picked like the most exciting time in the history of the universe to be on planet Earth. And I said, okay, you call it exciting. I have probably some other words for it, but okay. But you know what? I can be done now, and I'm really not going back there. It's like, I'm home. I'm staying home. I love it here. I'm kind of annoyed that I ever left, but I see your point. But I'm not going back. So here I am, 5'4", and you know, I'm not going back, and you can't make me. And they're looking down like, it's all right, dear. You don't have to. You can stay here if you want. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Okay. This is good. This is good. So just as I like completely relaxed into that, and I was just really enjoying that feeling of I don't have to go back, and I'm here, and I'm home, and I'm in the love, I hear in my head, but let us show you what you could accomplish if you go back. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in the emergency room. And I started swearing. And the nurse came over, and I said, why am I here? And she said, you're in the hospital. You were in a car accident. You have a severe concussion. I said, no, why am I here? Now, of course, I'm not talking about the hospital. I'm talking about planet Earth in a body. You were in a car accident. I'm like, never mind. It's like, oh my God, I'm back. And I'm playing it over in my head, and I'm like, I told them I wasn't coming back. They said I didn't have to come back. Why am I here? Well, why am I here is the question that haunted me for the next 20, 25 years. It's like, so, you know, you have a near-death experience. Everybody loves to hear about being in the light because it is spectacular. It's spectacular. And you have just that feeling of being so not just loved, but cherished. Cherished. It's if it feels like there's a hole in heaven, if you want to use that term. I try not to use religious terms because they're loaded and everybody has their own view of what that means. But it's kind of as if there's a hole in heaven for every one of us that's on the planet. And they can feel that hole. It's like the same way when we lose a loved one. There's a hole in our lives that's palpable. And you feel that hole every day, that missing part, you know, that used to be there that isn't. That's the way it felt there for each one of us. And I was mad. And I was mad for, maybe a year. And then I got depressed. And I spent about 5 years, 7 years clinically depressed because I did not want to be here. I was mad that I was here. I did not want to participate. And yet I had to drag myself to work every day in order to, you know, pay for a roof over my head. And I did that, but that was about all I did. And because you come back from this experience and you have this totally different perspective. And perspective tends to imply a mental and an intellectual understanding, but it's more than that. It's a deep understanding of what's real and what isn't real. And I think most NDEers go through a period of taking stock where they realize that the persona, the ego that they've created is at odds to some degree with those new understandings. And so once you figure that out, it's like, okay, so now what do I do? Because there is a compulsion to adjust yourself and your surroundings, your situations and circumstances, to adjust them so that there's a better fit between sort of who you know you are, how you know you're supposed to be and be acting in the world, and the way you have been. And that's not an easy process. And doing that, going through that process, they call integration. Now, there's been research and they say, oh, it takes 15 years to go through integration. It's like, well, I know I'm a slow learner, but I would say 35 years and counting, because I don't think you ever complete integration. But the other side of that coin is integration, as we call it, in my view, is the same thing that any seeker goes through. Any seeker who is on the path to enlightenment goes through this process of, recognizing this part of my personality or this thing that I'm doing in life doesn't fit with who I think I'm supposed to be. So I need to shift that and change that. And so I think I came away after 35 years plus with kind of an understanding of what that process is and the lessons that we learn along the way. And so to me, it's more fun to talk about those things than it is even to talk about my NDE, because that's like the 5 minutes of bliss. And then the rest of it is 35 years of processing. And I think you kind of have to be a masochist to a certain degree to do all this, but it really, what I've also learned, because I've gone through it for so long, is that the more you do, the more you bring your life and yourself into alignment with basically your higher self, with who you really are, and the more authentic you become in your life, the better your life becomes. It's like magic. And, all of that stuff, when we're trying to make something happen and it doesn't happen, and we feel like we're being punished or something, it's like, that's just our own resistance, because maybe that thing you're fighting for so hard is not the thing that you need. And to me, like, some of the biggest lessons were, it's all about love. And that includes the fact that we are all deeply, deeply beloved at all times, unconditionally. It's about loving others and being a force for love and kindness and compassion and grace in the world. And what I've come to believe, one of the most important parts of that is it's about loving ourselves. And I mean loving ourselves, not the false ego, not the arrogance. If there was a room full of 500 people and you asked who loves themselves in this room, everybody would raise their hand because we all think we love ourselves. But do we really? Do we love who we really are? Do we embrace those parts of us that we think are flaws and imperfections? And in fact, have we understood finally that those flaws and imperfections that we perceive are our greatest gifts to the world and to ourselves? That's what self-love is. Self-love is when we protect ourselves the way we would our own child, when we set good boundaries and maintain them, when we demand to be treated with respect and integrity, when we walk away from toxic situations because they are toxic. That's all part of self-love. And I have come to believe that all the problems on this planet are the result of a lack of self-love. Because when you start walking in self-love, you automatically gain self-esteem and a sense of worthiness because you know how loved you are. And you automatically start to trust the universe because you start to realize that you're part of that. You are of the stuff from which the universe is made, that you have a place here, that it's an important place, and therefore the universe supports you, protects you, guides you at all times. And the more you step into that, the more you can let go of the false sense of control, because control is an illusion. And yet we have a society that says, you know, you have to have your 1-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan, your 15-year plan. It's like, I don't know. I don't know where the universe is going to guide me next week, let alone 5 years from now. But when we get out of our way and we stop trying to push the truck up the mountain when that's not even the direction we're supposed to go, then the universe can come in and lay the red carpet for us. When we start communing with our higher selves and our guidance, and we listen to what we're being told and advised, and we follow that advice, then things just fall into place. It's like magic. Now, as I said earlier, I'm a slow learner. It's taken me like 30 years to figure some of this stuff out. Because I was fighting it the whole way, because in my mind, I knew better, you know, and all of the things that I knew better always just got me in trouble because they didn't work out, because they weren't supposed to. And I had all of these ideas of what was supposed to be based on what other people had taught me about what they expected of me. But they didn't really know who I was. So, hello. You know, if you're an artist and your family keeps telling you have to be a rocket scientist, it's just not going to work. But you could be a really good artist. And if somebody would just come along and say, you're a good artist, why don't you work on that? And you had enough gumption to actually follow that, despite all these people saying, no, you should be doing this. Your life could be pretty golden if you'd follow that. So one of the things when I was talking to my guides there, I said, okay, so you have to tell me, why did I get it that we kind of in broad strokes arrange for certain things to happen in our lives. And I understand I did that, but why did I have to make it so hard on myself? And, why was my childhood so hard? Why was my family environment so critical? And nothing I ever did was right. I was just, stupid and crazy as far as they were concerned, and weird. And I didn't fit in, and I often got punished for it. And why would I set that up? And I said, was I a masochist or something? It's like, if I am, don't ever let me go do that again. And they said, no, you were determined in this life, you were going to master self-love, because you have things to do later in your life. And in order to do those things, you would have to have self-love. So that's one of the hardest lessons to learn. And you've been working on it for several lifetimes, and you just haven't been able to master it yet. And this time you basically said, I'm going to learn it, or die trying. And I said, well, yeah, it almost killed me. And they said, almost. It's like, easy for you to say, you're not in a body. You didn't experience all of that crap. But they said, if you're trying to learn self-love, what things do you put in your life that will force you to learn that? And I said, oh, gee, parents who love me and say I can do anything because I'm so smart and wonderful? No. You set up abandonment, rejection, criticism, belittling, because otherwise you're just looking outside of yourself to the people around you to tell you that you're lovable. And when they don't tell you that, you believe that you're not. But when you have love from inside you, when you can stand up after years of abandonment and rejection and criticism and say, I am a divine being. I am beloved. I am wonderful. I am a miracle, exactly as I am. Nobody can ever take that away from you, ever. And that's one of the big lessons that we have chosen to learn going through this cycle of lives. I keep wondering whether that's harder than forgiveness. I'm not sure, because I think both of them are pretty awful. I mean, look what Jesus had to go through in order to learn that one, to master that one. And this is my cat, Sasha, who apparently has decided he needs to be seen. Feline energy coming through. So that's not an easy thing to learn, even when you know intellectually, because what I learned through my NDE was that I had all of this information about metaphysics and how things worked, but it was here and it wasn't here. It wasn't in my heart. It wasn't integrated into my life. I wasn't acting on what I knew, except to use it as a club to beat people up and make myself feel better about myself. And Sasha, please. And so it takes some time. I grew up at a time when the sense of humor at the time was sarcasm and teasing, and I was the queen. And I suddenly realized after my NDE that sarcasm and teasing are hostile actions. And I went through years of trying to retrain myself not to have that be my automatic go-to. And it takes time and it takes practice. And I learned we have an incredible feedback loop in the universe because it will show us how far we've come. And because life is kind of a mirror and it shows us, we will get mirror situations in our lives to show us where we are. And so I would get, if I had people who were treating me badly, say somebody cheated me, and I'd say, well, but I don't cheat people. So why would I attract that? What I didn't realize was I was cheating myself. So sometimes the mirror shows us how we've been treating other people, and it's kind of like instant karma that way. But sometimes it shows us how we've been treating ourselves, which wasn't particularly in a loving way. So we have the mirror feedback loop. The other thing that we have is being triggered. And, we love to blame, when somebody upsets us, it is their fault. We had nothing to do with it. It's their fault. And they upset me. It's their fault. Well, the thing is, if someone triggers us, it's because there's something inside us that hasn't been healed yet. So we can sit in victimhood and wallow in the fact of those people done me wrong and they're going to pay. Or we can say, wow, they pushed a button and I didn't even know that that button was there. I better go inside and see where that button came from and what that button's about. So we can use this feedback loop because we are always being shown where we are in our learning and healing process. In essence, where we are on the path to enlightenment. And as I say, what I realized was that the more I became authentic, the more I became accepting of my own flaws and my own vulnerabilities and my own very human, imperfect humanness, and the more I could share that with other people, what I found was, lo and behold, I was much more relatable. And it was like a superpower. Because as I've gone through this healing process and I've learned these things, just because I wasn't a quick learner and I had to do things over and over and over and over again, because mastery involves being able to you understand it and you've mastered the issue, whatever the issue is, in every single possible way it could be presented to you. I've been able to help people to be able to say, well, this was where I was once, and these are some of the tools I use that help me to change that. So when we can share our vulnerability and our humanness with other people, we're here to like take each other's hands and walk through life together. We're not supposed to be at each other's throats trying to get one up. And our life becomes so much easier as we become authentic, as we walk through life with each other, as we invite our guides and our higher self in to give us advice and guidance. And when we actually listen to it, as I say, that's when it feels like the universe rolls out the red carpet and you just flow. I mean, in the 70s, we all said, go with the flow, baby. And I think we didn't understand what that really meant, but it's perfect because the only time that life doesn't work for us is when we're trying to go against the flow. But we've made up all these rules in our heads that we prefer to follow. For example, you're in a situation that is becoming toxic to you. And you think, I should leave this situation. This is bad. This is hurting me. This is hurting my health being here. And then some voice in your head says, don't be a quitter. Oh, only quitters would leave. It's like, or my personal favorite that got me was with a supervisor who really did not like me. And I found out later why, because of the past life thing. But I kept saying, I'm the spiritual one. I should be able to turn this around. Well, that was putting a lot of onus on myself. It's like, I could only do as much as I could do, but if the other person wasn't willing to meet me halfway, it wasn't going to happen. And I finally had to let myself off that hook and say, yeah, you can leave now. You've done everything you possibly could, and you've stayed here probably 5 years longer than you should have, but okay. But, and I had been told, I heard like a party in my living room the night that I decided I was going to retire from that job. And they were not congratulating me for finally getting it. They were congratulating each other for finally getting me up over the hump. My guides are funny. But anyway, so those are some of the things I've learned, that, it's all about love. It's about loving each other. It's about loving ourselves. And, if we can change our life, we can change our world if we decide to, but we have to change our mind first and our hearts, because everybody says we want world peace. And we could have world peace tomorrow if everybody would act with peace in their hearts. But you can't say, I want world peace, and then go yell at the cashier, at the grocery store, because she didn't give you the right change or something. We have to be congruent. We have to have our actions be aligned with what we want, and what we want has to be aligned with who we are as divine beings. So what else? People, everybody says they come back from their NDE and they can't remember why. They know they came back with a mission. They came back with a purpose, but they can't remember what that is, and it drives them crazy. And I can attest to this. I mean, it drives you insane, because it feels like a nasty test, because, especially I wasn't told I had to come back. For some reason, I changed my mind and agreed to come back, which really was just horrifying to me. And I knew I came back for a reason, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was. And I was like, okay, I'm here. You better tell me, because I just can't stand this. And we tend to go about finding our mission or finding our purpose by doing things. It becomes like a resume item. So the first thing I did was, well, I always wanted to write a book, so I'm going to write a book. And I wrote a book. At that time, people were not writing books about their NDEs. So I wrote a fantasy novel, and I put everything I learned about life into the fantasy novel. And that didn't go anywhere. And I thought, okay. I came back with a mission. I thought you were pushing me toward writing a book, so why did it just like go nowhere? Must be something else. So I tried doing Reiki. couldn't get any clients. I ended up discovering Reconnective Healing, which I still do today, because when I first felt the frequencies from Dr. Eric Pearl brought Reconnective Healing, and they felt very familiar to me. And it wasn't until later that I realized, to me, they feel like the energy of home. So I still do Reconnective Healing. But I kept trying these different things and nothing went anywhere. At one point, I would have people in my office who would come, they would come and sit all day long. People would come and sit in my office and tell me their problems, and I would give them advice. And then they come back and say, oh my God, that was really good. So I asked the guides once, and I said, I want to get paid for doing that. And they said, well, kind of, you are getting paid. It's like, oh, okay. So I also do coaching, but what I came to realize is, again, it's right in front of us. We overlook the obvious so much, and we always try to make things more complicated than they are, that it's not a thing. It's not a thing. Our purpose is to peel away the layers of who we are not to get down to who we are, and then to live authentically in the world. And as we live authentically in the world, we're raising our vibration, and we're helping to raise the vibration of other people. And to me, that is the mission. Anything else we want to do, because we're not human doings, we're human beings, so be authentic. Anything we want to do, like write a book or do coaching, energy work in an office, be a lawyer, be a doctor, whatever we want to do, is just gravy. As long as we keep it congruent with who we are and with love. And so to me, as I say, for many, many years, I always thought that my mission for coming back was a thing. And I do think that what they told me of, let us show you what you can accomplish if you come back, again, nothing is ever a one-way street. So it helped me because I grew more in self-love mastery over those years. But I've also been able to help other people. And I think I probably signed on to go around and talk about my near-death experience. And I guess you have to have a certain amount of self-love to do that, because when I first started doing it, people looked at me like I had two heads. And I had to be really grounded in, this is my experience. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. I'm just telling you what happened. And I was able to do that, and able to do it more the more I became comfortable in my own skin. And trust me, being comfortable in your own skin is a lot better than turning yourself into a pretzel trying to please everybody, because you never will.
Can I jump in with a question?
Please do.
A very interesting point in that a lot of people are asking for guidance, and they just are not really hearing it. They're not sure. Is it their own voice? They're going in this direction, they're going in that direction. You made the point yourself that you were trying different things. So what you're saying, I think, is that our purpose is to really discover who we are, essentially. Can you tell a little bit more about that? Because we do go off in different directions thinking it's things that we have to do. That's our purpose. But you're saying discover who we are, be our authentic selves, and by definition, we start to raise awareness that way?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because a lot of times, I mean, granted, we live in a world where we have to have a job, we have to earn money, we have to keep, a roof over our heads, that kind of thing. We have to do that. But the more we can uncover who we are, it's kind of like being the age I am. I look at it like I spent the first half of my life being socialized by other people and taught who I was, who I was supposed to be, and what I was supposed to do. And I took all of those ideas to heart. But as I tried to do those things, they never worked out. And that's part of the feedback loop. If you're doing something that feels like you're pushing a truck up a mountain, I would pause and ask, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Or is this what I'm supposed to be doing now? Because sometimes it's just a question of the timing isn't right. But the more obstacles you hit, to me, in my life, the more it shows I'm kind of going in the wrong direction. And sometimes we have to. It's like, hey, it's the only job I have, until I find something better, I got to stay here. That's fine, And, but we have that feedback loop. Now, I'm not saying that everything, once you start doing what you're supposed to be doing, there's no effort. I'm not saying that, because there is effort. But there's a difference between a reasonable effort and an effort that you do to perfect something that you enjoy doing, and effort where you feel like you're beating your head against the wall and nothing is progressing. So if you're in the beating your head against the wall and nothing is progressing, that's a time when you can, get quiet, sit down and say, what am I doing? What am I supposed to be doing here? And our guidance is not always clear. I mean, one of my most frequent prayers is, tell me what this means. What am I supposed to do with that? Mm-hmm. But the more we can tune into our guidance and communicate with our guides and our higher self, the clearer things get. And it's those tiny little nudges. People used to say, you're such a procrastinator, because I'd say, oh, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go to the grocery store in a minute. And then I'd putz around the house. I couldn't get myself out of the house no matter what I tried to do. And then finally I'd get out of the house and I'd get to the grocery store and I'd run into somebody that I hadn't seen in years that was just a joy to run into. Or I'd run into somebody who had some information that I had been looking for and they just volunteered it. Now, if I had left the house when I said I was going to leave the house, that would not have happened. So am I a procrastinator or am I following my guidance? I mean, it's a fine line. Everybody has to, it's a practice. It's a practice. You have to experiment. You can keep a notebook of hunches. I used to do that when I lived in Silver Spring and I worked in Crystal City, which was a heck of a commute. And this was decades ago. And I was working on my intuitive, following my guidance. And so I could go down, I could go to the Beltway, I could go Wisconsin Avenue, I could go Connecticut Avenue, I could go 16th Street. So I'd get in the car and I'd say, I think I'm going to go Connecticut Avenue today. And then I'd sit and wait to feel how it felt in my body. And for me, again, you need to learn what it feels like for you. But for me, if it was a yes answer, my shoulders would kind of fall and relax. And if it was a no answer, I'd sort of like clench up. So I'd say, okay, well, maybe I'll go Wisconsin Avenue today. And my shoulders would go down and I'd go Wisconsin Avenue. Well, at one point I said, okay, if I'm going to be practicing this and trying this out and working with my guides, you need to give me feedback about whether I'm following it correctly or not. So, because, we can ask for help and set parameters. And So what would happen, I'd be driving down Wisconsin Avenue and I'd hear on the radio that there had been some horrible wreck on Connecticut Avenue that had traffic backed up for miles. And I'm like, okay, good job. Sometimes I would ignore it and I'd go down Connecticut Avenue and get stuck in that traffic jam. It's like, okay. So you can keep like a journal of the hunches that you get. And it's not it's not a test. It's not a report card of whether you listen to your guidance or not. It's more of just a tracking of, I got this hunch, I did this is how it turned out. Sometimes, you'll say, I got this hunch, but I ignored it, didn't turn out so well. Got this hunch, I went with it. This is what I found out later, so I'm glad I followed that hunch. And it helps you to fine tune what you're tuning into. The other thing is, it really helps to actively sit down and try to understand what your beliefs about yourself are and where you got them. I still have voices in my head that'll say, oh, you can't do that. You're not good enough. But I know that voice well enough. I know whose voice it is. And I can say, shut up, I don't believe you anymore. Go away. But we have all the stuff that we were taught when we were growing up. We got it from our parents, we got it from our siblings, we got it from the people in school with us, we got it from our teachers, we got it from our ministers, we got it from all kinds of people. And in a way, they all had an agenda and taught us things accordingly, indoctrinated us. And as children, we believe all those things as if they're true. So it really does behoove us to take the time to go through and say, if you hear, we are not the thoughts in our head. A lot of the thoughts in our head came from somebody else. So when we can catch a thought like that, especially a negative one, and think, wow, where did that thought come from? How long have I been carrying that thought around in my head? Do I believe it? And even if we don't want to say that person lied to me, which I actually did a lot, because it made me feel better. but you can say, well, maybe that was true at some point in my life, but it's not true anymore. And getting to recognize what beliefs we have about ourselves and what we're supposed to accomplish, what we're supposed to enjoy, what expectations we have about ourselves and other people. Expectations are like the worst thing we can have because we're always disappointed. Because almost nobody lives up to our own expectations, including ourselves. So the more we can let go of expectations, and sometimes that's a process of figuring out, where did I get that expectations? Why would I expect that? And then the next question, what's more realistic? As we go through that process, it's like, and this was part of my process all through the 90s of figuring out, I was at a point where I did not know who I was. I didn't know what I liked because I was always doing things that my friends wanted to do because I wanted to please them. And I had to go through and say, do I like doing this? No, I don't think so. Wow, that's information, write it down. Then I could test it and say, okay, I don't think I like this. And I'd go, wow, I really don't like this. I've been doing it for 20 years and I don't like it. Okay. And then I'd start trying different things. Well, do I like this? Sometimes it was a no, sometimes it was a yes, sometimes it was a but going through that process as an adult of really learning what it is you like, what it is you don't like, what brings you joy. That's the most important question. What brings me joy? And then you have people who say, well, it doesn't matter what brings you joy because you need to have a job and you're not going to find a job doing that. Maybe, maybe not.
You also
People believe you can't get a job doing what brings you joy. You won't find one.
you also said earlier that we need to sort of discover discover who we're not in order to discover who we are. And so discovering who we are is it sounds very simple, but it's incredibly complicated. How do you actually really do that?
You go through that process and it's the peeling away the layers of all the things you've been taught about yourself that may or may not be true. And you can take each thing and you can look at it and say, is this true or is this not true? And you can test it out.
So essentially who we are then with that model is a series of what we like versus what we don't like. Our like brings us joy, and that gets us closer to who we are authentically. Yes. Is that the sum total of who we are? Our preferences for certain things, or do you think there's something deeper?
Well, who we really are, I believe, is divine, powerful beings in a human body. So you can start with that idea.
Right. But you and I, in our very essence, are the same but different, probably, aren't we? We have some commonality, but we're probably in our essence quite different from each other.
Right. We're all part of the ocean, that ocean of love. But we all have our own gifts. We all have our own essence. We all have, we're all, each one of us is a piece of this giant puzzle, and the puzzle isn't complete, without it, or more to the point, we're all in the symphony. And, if I'm supposed to play the flute, but I decide that all my friends are playing the oboe, so I want to play the oboe, then the symphony isn't going to have the flute. And it doesn't need another oboe. It needs my flute.
Yeah. So we each have our own instrument. We're each our own note in this.
Yes.
At the same time, we're all part of a larger...
Of the orchestra, yes.
So, but trying to find who we are, one way to go about it is, as you said, to look at what brings us joy, what doesn't bring us joy. So we get to know ourselves through the duality, through the distinction of what we like versus what we don't like.
Yes.
To really just try to get a sense of who we are. But then ultimately, there's probably something even beyond just a bunch of preferences. And that's probably who we really are. But that's complicated. I mean, that doesn't sound straightforward. Maybe just being, maybe that's the essence of the meditation, the yoga. It's
you can do it with whatever way you want. I personally don't meditate, so I've had people say, "Oh, you have to meditate every, blah blah blah," and it's like I don't do it that way. That doesn't work for me. My meditation comes when I'm washing dishes, or when I'm in the shower, or when I'm just sort of walking and looking at nature. I get downloads, and so but the whole discovering who we are is, we're brought up in a society or a world really that tells us about original sin, and we're flawed, and we have to try really hard and be really good, do what all the authorities want us to do in order to get to heaven. And that's not true. And so that's a belief that we need to discover if we have it or not, and recognize that that's not true. And then it's like, if that's not true, then who am I? And it is, people who can meditate, that's fantastic. Do that. Everybody needs to find the way that works for them. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that if you're not in constant joy all the time, then you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, because, we're on planet Earth and life is not easy here. So there are trials and tribulations and difficulties of dealing with other humans and that kind of thing. But the more, when we're following our bliss, as Joseph Campbell used to say, that's when I believe, when we are most in touch with our essence.
It's a good point. It's a very good point. Yeah. We've got some questions coming in, and I would encourage everybody to either raise their hand or please send us a question for Ellyn through the chat. Sherry's asking, Ellyn, do you still communicate with those beings that you met on the other side today?
Yes, I do. They are always with me. They're here right now. They feed me some really good lines sometimes when I'm doing presentations, or when I'm writing a newsletter, or even when I'm coaching a client. They are. It's an interesting process because sometimes they give me pictures and sometimes they give me actual words. If it's time for me to write a newsletter, I'll be going to sleep at night and I'll be having paragraphs written in my head. And I'm like, wait until tomorrow. But, and that doesn't mean that I'm special. Every single person has the ability to do this with their own guides. We all have guides. We all have like many, many people around us who just happen to not be in a body, who want to help us. They cannot help us. They cannot interfere unless we ask them. So one of the hardest things for me was learning to, on a consistent basis, ask for help. And now I'm like a bag lady. I walk down the street talking to my guides. Whatever I'm trying to do, it's like, you got to help me with this. Please help me with this.
Earlier,
they want to help.
Yeah. Well, you said earlier that they basically showed you your past lives. Mm-hmm. You saw a progression of the learning process. Can you share some of those past lives and some of what that progression of learning is about?
Ooh,
I didn't mean to fool you.
Oh, I know, really. It's like, just give me a minute. That's funny because I haven't really thought about that. I think about the past lives periodically because, of course, we have certain lives that really do have kind of an impact on the current life.
Okay.
And that can be for good or not. For example, I know that I was a Knight Templar in, I think, at least 3 lives.
Oh.
And there are times, I'm telling you, I get very wistful for those lives because I'll be having an issue with I would have an issue with somebody at the office. And I think, it was just so much easier when you could strap on your whatever chainmail and armor and jump on the horse and grab your sword and your shield and ride off and just lop off people's heads. And you didn't have to deal with this stuff. It's like, those were the days. So we do have these bleed through or these like memories of kind of the way it was. I know that I had a life when I was very wealthy in New York around the turn of the 1900s. And throughout my entire life this time, I just kept thinking, I'm supposed to have a lot more money than this. I don't understand why I don't. we do have these memories of different lives. Now, in that one, in the one in New York, let me think. It was interesting because I had an NDE in that one. I lost my husband and my son in a carriage, an early car accident. And the three of us were in it, and we all died. And I came back. And I was totally bereft because I had lost them. And I didn't want to be bereft. And I was told that one of the reasons I felt so bereft after I came back from my NDE in this life was because I was having like flashbacks to that. But that, again, that turned my life around in that life. And I got very active in the anti-child labor movement. So that was another life where I had an NDE and my life completely did 180. I was just thinking of another one. I did realize that the reason my supervisor and I never got along was because I kept having flashes when I looked at her of, like, I would be from a perspective of standing on the ground, and I'd be looking up and she'd be sitting on a horse as a male with that kind of flat brimmed hat, straw hat, and a whip at her waist. And I realized that I was an uppity slave. And in fact, I was a runaway slave. And she had been the overseer, and she caught hell when I ran away and they didn't catch me. It's like, no wonder she hated me on sight. It's like, it took me years to allow that vision to come into my head. And then it was like, oh, now it all makes sense. I think, I don't know that there was actually a progression, because growth is never a straight line. It's always like forward and back, forward and back, forward and back, forward and back. And, so you see a life where you did some things really well and other things not so well. So then in the next life, you would try to, you might try to do those things that you didn't so well to do those better. What were some of those are all I can think of at the moment, but the big lessons we never master in just one life because they're difficult.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that, Ellyn. There's a question here from Susan. Is there a difference in determining if the hunches or downloads are from your own brain or from your higher consciousness, from higher consciousness?
There is a difference. The way I received a lot of the information that I got during my NDE, I've likened it to downloads that when I came back, I didn't remember everything, but it's all in there. And it's sort of like somebody will ask a question and a file in my head will open up. But that's the files that were downloaded. It's like tuning into that little voice, that intuitive voice, that guidance voice. It has a different quality than when it's just a thought, especially a repeated thought. Like, why would you try that? You can't do that. That's a thought that was planted in my head and it stayed there, but it's not from my guides. That was from somebody else. and it's stuck. So it's a question of just practicing and learning to discern the difference between the two. I mean, if you're being told to do something, you know, if you feel like you're getting an idea to do something that you really have resistance against, I would definitely say, where is this thought coming from? And see what answer I get. Because our guides aren't going to tell us to do anything illegal. They're not going to tell us to do anything that's going to harm us or anybody else. Might hurt somebody's feelings. You know, if you leave a toxic relationship, that might hurt their feelings, but that's on them. But the quality of the guidance would feel loving, would feel it does have a different quality, and it just takes practice to learn what that feels like.
Can I ask you about what you shared as far as your adoptive mother coming to you at an early age, this your near-death experience? So you were really quite sensitive at the time. How old were you when you
I was 12. I was 12 when she died.
And so, I mean, that's extraordinary that you had that experience. And it was intuitive, very sensitive. It sounds as though you were before you even had the NDE.
Yes, I was pretty intuitive, and but at that age, I didn't realize that was different necessarily from what other people had. And what I remember is I'm claircognizant mostly, which means you just know things. And I would walk into the living room and say something to my parents, and they would they would blanch and say, "How did you know that?" And to me, it would be something totally innocent. It was just something I knew. And then I was always being accused of listening at doors as a child. You've been eavesdropping again. It's like, no, I haven't. But in their mind, that was the only way I could know some of the things I knew. And I didn't think it was just something I knew. It's like, you walk out or you look at the sky and it looks like it's going to rain. It's like, you don't have to eavesdrop to figure that out, So I didn't realize. I think that part of that might have been why that early memory of me sobbing and saying, "How could you have left me with these people?" I might have had an understanding of that to some degree at that age, that I'm very different from these people and I don't fit in, and they think I'm weird, and I don't even know enough. I don't have enough understanding to understand what it is I do that's so different. But then when my mother showed up, it was like, whoa. Yeah, there's more going on here than they're teaching me in Sunday school, and I'm going to find out what it is.
Did you get any validation from your grandmother, your adopted grandmother, when she said, "Oh, no, it can't be that," and then she found out that your mother actually had passed? Did that give you any validation?
Oh, yeah, I knew I was right. I mean, I knew I was right at the time when I said it. And then when my father called and said that she had passed, it was like, yep.
Well, I meant in terms of your adopted family then sort of really understanding that you had some intuitions.
Oh, no. I don't think my grandmother told my father, because they would have really, that was not something that was entertained in our house at all.
All right. Tell us about when you did have your near-death experience and you were greeted, you had your greeting committee, as it were, and you saw your adoptive mother and your grandmother, but you also saw your biological father and I think you said biological grandparents.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All there, they all recognized you. You recognized them, even though you'd never actually met them on this plane. And you said something about, this was all sort of pre-planned, they were all in on it, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more, just that understanding.
Well, I had read this in like metaphysical literature and stuff that, you plan your lives. And the idea is that, we don't plan every little thing. We plan the broad strokes and major life events, because we want to experience those major life events because we can learn something through them, or we want to see what it's like. So when I saw my adoptive family, and then I saw my biological relatives and knew immediately who they were, and they were like good friends with my adoptive family that were there. And it was like, you all know each other. And it was like, well, yeah. And of course, we planned it all. Well, one of the oddest things was, so that was 85 when I had my NDE. And in 96, I found my biological family. And both of my parents were gone at that point. And I found out that my biological father had dropped dead of a heart attack in 1964 when I was 14 years old. And so, yeah, he was on the other side when I had my NDE. But what struck me was I was going to lose a parent at a young age. I would have been 14 rather than 12. If I had stayed with my biological family, I would have been 14 rather than 12. I was going to lose a parent at an early age, no matter what. And it was like, oh, there was a plan A and there was a plan B, because we have free will. And I did find out my birth mother tried very, very hard to keep me. And she was not married at the time, but my birth father was the love of her life. And a year later, she ran away with him and they had a son. So I have met my biological brother, who is a full brother. We have both parents were the same. But I'm just constantly struck with the idea that I would have lost a parent at a young age, either way, no matter how the free will went, because that was something that for whatever reason I wanted to experience, of what effect that would have on a human to lose a parent at that age. So having that happen, it reconfirmed in my mind, besides the fact that when I saw pictures of my biological father, it was like, yep, there he is, exactly the person I saw during my NDE.
So, yeah, so presumably then you with the beings of light planned that at some point, one way or the other, you were going to lose a parent. And any idea what that lesson was, other than just being grieving? Do you think it was a sense of growing from abandonment, being left alone?
I think it was part of the abandonment thing, because when, being given up for no matter what they say, I would have arguments with the social worker and I would say, she gave me up. It's like, no, she arranged an adoption. It's different. It's like, no, she gave me up. She abandoned me. You feel that as an abandonment. Then my adoptive mother abandoned me. Then my adoptive father kind of adopted me or abandoned me like 3 years later when he married my stepmother, who had 4 kids. And they tried to kind of pretend that I wasn't there. My brother at the time moved out of the house at that point, so he abandoned me. I had like abandonment, rejection. And you can stay in that and wallow in it and feel like a victim, or you can say, why would I have all of these things? What was I trying to learn from this? And it was learning self-reliance, independence, finding the love inside me for myself, regardless of what anybody else out there, whether I had a loving parent or not, whether I had whatever. That was all part of that
When you say
plan.
when you say your I think you said your adoptive mother abandoned you. Do you mean when she passed?
When she died. I mean, it was felt as an abandonment. Yeah.
And how old was your biological mother when she had you? That's one of the questions from Sherry.
I think 19 or 20, maybe younger. I'm not sure.
But they had a son together.
They had a son together. He was born a year and 11 months to the day later after I was. So they got together fairly quickly. It turns out that my biological mother's mother was the one who separated them. I gather because he was part Cherokee, which was not acceptable in 1950.
Okay. But your biological brother, was he brought up by your parents, your biological
Yes.
parents? They didn't put him up for adoption.
No, because they had gotten married by then. They got back together and eloped.
Okay. So sadly, you missed that by about 2 years or so.
Well, but I think, not consciously by my plan, but by my soul wanted to learn certain things. So that's what the plan was.
Your reasons for abandonment surely have taken you within yourself to find that stability of love within you. Wouldn't you say? That's a question.
Yes, absolutely.
So do you feel that with all the abandonment, do you feel that you've learned the lesson, or do you feel that you're still learning it? Of being there for yourself, the self-love to conquer?
I think there's always more to learn, but I think for the most part, I've pretty much mastered it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Your work, you're an intuitive coach, you're a vibrational catalyst. What is a vibrational catalyst?
Somebody called me that once and I thought, oh, I like that. I have a tendency to walk into a room and the energy shifts. And sometimes I can push buttons just by walking into a room. And I don't have to do anything. I don't have to say anything, because like my vibration hits into somebody else's. And I think I keep my vibration high enough that a lot of times when people interact with me, there is an entrainment. Well, there's always entrainment when two people interact. And that can, and it can catalyze things for other people because it raises their vibration too.
Okay, so your mere presence.
That sounds terrible, doesn't it? It's not anything, most of the time, it's not anything I do on purpose. I just noticed over the years, I can walk into a room and suddenly everybody gets hostile and I haven't even done anything.
So what is it that they're picking up then that is having an effect?
I think it's just the difference in vibration. And I also tend to see through people. I can see people's masks, but I also can see behind them. And a lot of people, especially people who rely on the facade that they've created, do not like it when people can see behind it. And they know, they can feel it, that I can see who they really are.
So that must help you immensely with your work as an intuitive coach. So tell us a little bit about that. Somebody comes to you, they need some direction. What are some of the techniques, skills that you draw on to help them?
Let's see. It really depends on what they're working on. I'm not a psychic. I don't do readings. Sometimes people, they want to come in and say, okay, tell me about myself. And it's like, no, because that's not what I do. I have a conversation with the person. And as they're talking about a situation, a number of things happen. First, I see patterns really quickly. So I can see a pattern based on what they're saying that they may not notice as a pattern. So I can point that out and perhaps question, why do you think you have this pattern? At the same time, I'm getting information from my guides, and I might also have like some of those files in my head opening up. And I can kind of, if there's a situation presenting itself, I can often help the person to see things about that situation that they haven't seen before, like why it's happening or what the dynamics are or what they can learn from it.
Sounds like psychotherapy.
Pardon?
Sounds like psychotherapy.
Well, no, I'm not a psychotherapist. So
I'm saying is, you're pointing out tendencies and patterns that people are blind to in their own behaviors and trying to look behind those.
Yes, and sometimes I can do that, and then I can also. Some of it is I can give some examples from my own life of this worked and this didn't. Or I can a lot of it is reassurance, to tell you the truth. Like people come and say, oh, I feel like I want to move somewhere, but I don't know where to move. I don't know what to do. I feel restless. I want to move somewhere. And I can talk about my own journey of moving, and how I wanted to move for like 5 years before I did, and I didn't know where I wanted to move. And that when we have something that we think is that we want to do, but the answer of what we really want to do isn't there yet, sometimes it's just that the answer isn't there yet, and we have to be and we have to be patient, because it will come. But the more we're churning out, I want to know, 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 the information isn't coming in, because we're sending such a blast of energy out there, trying to impose our will on the universe, that we're not letting the answer come to us. So I think a lot of what I do is talk people down and say it. Just because you're not getting an answer right now it's not a flaw in you. It may be that the answer isn't there right now. The choice that you want to make isn't there to be made yet. So you may need to have some patience. And, what other things could you work on to get you ready for when the answer presents itself? That kind of thing. I kind of, it's like maybe the wise aunt more than the therapist. It's like, honey, just relax,
There's some overlap for sure. Reconnective healing practitioner. You do that too. What is that?
Reconnective healing was popularized by Dr. Eric Pearl, and Reconnective healing is a frequency that brings light, love, light, and information to the planet. And unlike some other energy healing that people do, it's reconnective healing frequency is sentient. And when you have it's kind of a leap for a lot of people, because when you have a client and a practitioner and the frequencies in the room, the humans are not the smartest ones. The frequencies know what needs to be healed. And the practitioner does not direct them in any way. I mean, I don't say you need to go heal this person's arm. I had a client once who came because he had rotator cuff surgery on his shoulder, and he didn't think it was healing fast enough. So I gave him the spiel and I said, look, I can't tell it what to do. You will get a healing, and you will get the healing that you need, but it may or may not manifest, in the physical form that you're hoping for. And, you just have to be happy with that. And I was like, oh, okay. So we did the session, and afterwards he's like, well, nothing really happened and my shoulder still hurts. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. So we were talking, and I said, so what did you observe? What did you observe in your body? Anything? No. And I said, look, okay, at the very least, I know that you were very relaxed, because I saw your breathing get deeper and slower, which is a sign of relaxation. And there was this long pause, and he looked at me with big eyes and he said, oh my God. And he took this deep breath and he looked at me, and I'm like, I didn't know what was going on. And he says, do you see that? I said, yeah. He takes another deep breath, and he says, I haven't breathed this deeply in 6 months, and my doctor has been worried because I've been losing lung capacity. Look at this. And he takes another deep breath, and he says, this is unbelievable. I haven't breathed this deeply in 6 months. And I burst out laughing, and I said, well, don't you think that that's a deeper healing than having your shoulder feel better? And don't you think that if you're getting the more appropriate amount of oxygen in your blood, and that blood going to that shoulder, don't you think it's going to heal faster now? And he's like, so I love that. I mean, every practitioner has their own favorite story, and that's mine, because neither of us would have ever thought to say, if I were directing it, I never would have said, oh, fix his lungs. I had no idea. And he never would have thought of it. He just wanted his arm to stop hurting. But he got a deeper healing that neither of us knew he really needed, or at least neither of us said he really needed. So the frequencies go where they want to go, and they heal what they see, what is perceived to be the deepest healing that's necessary. And to me, it's phenomenal. As I say, it seemed so familiar to me when I first got attuned to the frequencies. And then it took me a while to realize that it's because, to me, they feel like the energy, the frequency of home. And I have another friend who's a reconnective healing practitioner. And when we got to know each other as practitioners, I was telling her about my NDE, and she said, oh my God, I think I had one. And she started getting all the memories back of her NDE, and we compared notes, and she said, you're absolutely right. It feels to me like the frequency of home as well. So to me, that's why I keep doing it, because I just feel that it's, it's the real deal. It's the frequency of home. It's the frequency of love.
We have a question here from someone who's saying people react to her in the same way, for the same reason. When you were talking about walking into a room vibrationally, I think that's what this person is referring to. I'm often endangered by this, people being on different frequencies, I think. I'm not sure. This is because I'm dependent after a severe medical compromise. So people's reacting badly has a consequence for me that is dangerous. I've been injured, poisoned, etc. by people reacting.
Wow.
Does any of that, what to make of that?
I haven't had that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I've had people, I know that I've had people, complete strangers, you know, who have a reaction to me. A lot of times they'll just walk away. I've had a very mild examples of that sometimes in the office and that kind of thing, where people just, it's the old, they don't like me, but they don't know why. And sometimes people can feel threatened around me. And I don't get it, because I feel like I'm like a Saint Bernard puppy, you know. It's like, I just want people to like me. But, you know.
As you said earlier, you know, if there are people who are masking who they really are, and they sense that you can see through it, they're unnerved by that, and they're going to dislike you for it.
Right. Well, and I guess maybe I don't stick around people that I have a very fine tuned sense of danger, I think. And I'm also very, very in tune with my guides. And some of them some of them are Knights Templar. And they, I'm very protected, and I know it. So if I get even the slightest feeling of get out of this situation, I'm gone. I don't stop to ask why. I just go.
Well, Ellyn, we have just a couple of minutes left. If you could tell us a little bit about your near-death experience, R&R group. Is that is that rest and recreation? What is the R?
We have, I think you know Dave Bennett. Dave Bennett and Joan Fowler. I think you know Joan, and possibly Yvonne Sneeden. The four of us put on a retreat for a long weekend in October. And it's for people who have had NDEs or other profound spiritually transformational experiences. Mm-hmm. And we generally have like 20 to 25 people, and we basically spend a long weekend in a hotel meeting room. And we tell our stories, and we talk about the struggles that we've had with integration, and ways that we've learned to cope, or tools that we've learned to use. And basically, it's kind of like a 4-day love fest of kindred spirits getting together. It really is, to me, it renews my soul, because when you're somebody like us who's had transformative experiences, we all tend to be pretty sensitive, and the world can be pretty harsh. So it's like a haven of being among loving kindred spirits who have been through the same kinds of things, and we understand each other automatically, so we don't have to explain ourselves. It's just, this happened to me and my whole life changed, and everybody in the room goes, yeah, because they've experienced something to that effect too. So I have to say, I started it strictly out of selfish reasons, because I need that kind of communion with like-minded spirits. And I've been delighted that other people want to come too. So we have it every year in Virginia Beach at one of the hotels in the resort area, overlooking the ocean. And we often have schools of dolphins that come by and wave. It's really nice.
Thank you. Well, we have about 2 or 3 minutes left. How would you sort of sum up? What's the message that you'd like people to take away today from your experiences?
It really is all about love. And especially in these crazy times of chaos, the more we can remember that, the better. The more we can recognize that every single person, even when they don't agree with us, is part of the same ocean of souls, and ocean of love. And that the more we can come together and help each other, the better our lives will be. When we feel depressed, the best thing to do is go out and help somebody else. And in the process of trying to be more loving every day, remember to love yourself, because that's also extremely important. And society tends not to support that. They call us selfish, and that's not true. So,
well, on those wonderful words, thank you so very much for joining us this afternoon. It's been great fun. And
thank you.
very best. And maybe we'll see you at the next IANDS conference.
I'm planning on it. In fact, I'm working on a proposal to speak now.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Ellyn.
Thank you. Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone, for coming.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Take care. Bye.